Welcome to Frontend Hour. Today we are going to practice a TypeScript question. It's a React TypeScript question, and it's one of the questions where you migrate an existing app to TypeScript. So it's TypeScript migrate useState 1, and it's built on top of the useState 1 question. So if you haven't tried that, you can go and try that out. I'll put the link in the description, and there's also a video on the same. So if you remember from the previous question, there isn't an in-browser experience for this question. And that is because I want to give you the best experience. So that is ideally not possible in the browser. So I'm going to take you to the local for this question. And I've tried to make it easy for you. So I've set up a local set of instructions. You can just simply run these instructions, run these commands quickly, and you should be good to go. In case if you have any issues, you can of course contact me on Discord or just drop a comment or something. Since this is our first time setup, you should be running these commands. I already have pnpm installed, so I won't be running this command. But I would be running all these commands, the rest of these commands, which is basically clone the public repo, navigate into directory, install some dependencies, and navigate into the question and install some dependencies. And we are using pnpm to optimize this multiple installations. So whenever I launch future questions, you're not installing too many packages again, right? It's efficient in terms of disk space. So yeah, let's run these commands. Cool. Our dependencies are installed. I'm going to just open this in my editor. Great. Now we are in the exact question folder, and I'm going to quickly run pnpm dev to run my dev server, and it's using wheat underneath. So the dev server would run at localhost 5173, and the app should be working because it's a full working app. No issues, nothing to manage or something. But if you do notice the files, they're all JSX. Right, there's no TypeScript yet, and that is our goal for this question. We need to migrate all these files to TypeScript and in the process learn a bit about TypeScript. The way I like to approach any kind of migration is, in React at least, is to work on the child components first and then move up the parent. So in our case, the component tree is something like this. The main is the topmost component. Then we have our app component, and then the app component has the innermost child components, which is the task and the AddTask component. So we could ideally start migrating one of these files first, and then work on the other file and then move up to app component. So in our case, let's start with the task component. And it's quite simple. TypeScript is already set up for you. You just have to rename this file from JSX to TSX. And you would immediately see our editor line up with errors. And here's a quick note. The dev server might break. In that case, what you have to do is basically rerun your dev server and your application should work again. And some case TypeScript might not initiate properly. In that case, you should also restart your TypeScript server. So you can just press Command Shift P on your editor, and it will give you a quick command panel where you can just search for TypeScript, and you'll see the Restart TS server option. Just click on it, and it should fix some things for us. Now we see that the major errors, the major red lines are over here where we destructure our props. So this is because React doesn't know, at least TypeScript doesn't know what are these props and how many props are passed and what is the structure of these props. So let's start working with that first. So the way to let React components know what kind of props, we have to declare the type of these props. So I'm going to name it type. So the type has to start with lowercase type, and you can use type or interface. Stick to types. There is a use case for interfaces which will work on a different question or something, but usually both will work. You can use either of them, but preferably type is better. So type, I'm going to name it type task props. This is a convention I like to use. Let us first say that all of these types are still any, right? IDX is any, on delete is also any. And let our component know that, yeah, these are the three props that are being passed. Cool. At least the errors are gone from here, and we just have the errors and this TypeScript part. So what is any? Any in TypeScript is basically, it could be anything, right? You can pass a string, you could pass a number, you could pass an object, you could pass anything. That's not nice. That defeats the entire purpose of TypeScript. So you want to rather narrow down the type of that particular property. For example, we know from the use case of task, it looks like we have a task name object on it. So we can quickly say that the task has a task name. And what is it? It's a string, right? We're basically using it as a string over here. I've now narrowed down the type of the task to something like, yeah, it is an object with task name, which is a string. Similarly, we know there's a use case of IDX and it looks like it's a number over here, right? So I'm going to quickly type it into a primitive type, which is number. Next up, we have onDelete. OnDelete seems to be a callback function and it isn't taking any parameters or anything. So it's also not returning anything. So we can, the way we declare a property to be a function is using this arrow syntax method and literally say void. So void is nothing in TypeScript. So the function isn't returning anything. So basically type out void. And that is it. Our first migration is done. No more errors. Now let's work on the AddTask component. So again, the same stuff. We got to rename this to AddTask.tsx. Again, a lot of errors. Maybe, okay, dev server is still intact. And I think I might have to rerun my TypeScript server again so that it understands that this file has changed. Yeah, that is a little bit inconvenient to restart the TS server again and again. That's how TypeScript was. You have to do it. Now we see that we have a same issue with the props and also our event handler. Like what is E over here, right? Let us first work with the same stuff which we did previously on the onAdd part. Again, I'm going to declare a type AddTask props, and this would be a onAdd. Again, type it any, and let me also declare over here. It's going to be AddTask props. Again, looks like our dev server was killed. Again, restart, and we should be good. Okay, good. So what is onAdd? What is it taking? This time onAdd is taking a parameter, which is task. And what is task? You can hover over it and you can see that it's string. TypeScript was able to infer that information from this default value. So this time onAdd takes a parameter and returns nothing. Still, it doesn't return anything. And what it takes a string. And you can see that the error is gone from over here. And we only have one error to worry about now, which is the handle submit. So the biggest issue I see with React developers trying to use TypeScript is this part. How do you type something like these form submit handlers? There's a trick to it. The first common error which you would do when using this trick, it is to simply hover over on submit. And it will immediately tell you what is the attribute type and what is it taking. So you can quickly see that the submit is a form event handler and it takes a HTML form element. Maybe can we copy this part and put it over here? Okay, looks like now one error turned into two errors. What's happening over here? Try to read the TypeScript error message, but it's quite difficult to understand some of these error messages. For example, here it says prevent default does not exist on type form event handler. And if I look at here, it says type E React form event handler with a generic type HTML form element is not assignable to type form event handler HTML form element. Looks like we're trying to return a function to something that's a type. So a function type and a regular type. It seems like there's some incompatibility over here. And again, we see that there's a form event HTML form element not assignable to type form event handler. So reading these type messages, TypeScript error messages is quite difficult. So whenever you're working with something like sub handlers, here's a quick trick you can use. Instead of using pointing to the function directly, just try to use the callback method. And you know that this will give you E, right? Hover over E, you can see that you have a better information over here. The E type is react.form event HTML form element and not form event handler. In fact, the form event handler is the type of handle submit and not the type of the parameter. So that was the mistake which we did. So if you're confused about using TypeScript, you can always do something like this. But in our case, it was just that we put the type at the wrong place. It's not the type of the parameter, but it's the type of the entire function. Now you see that the error is gone. I've been working with React and TypeScript for a while, so I know that this is React.form event, not form event handler. So you can do that and the error message is gone again, right? Also, when you declare something like this, you can also hover over this function And it will also give you some information about, okay, what could be the parameter type. You can see that it's a react.form event with a generic type T. T is nothing but our HTML form element over here. So yeah, let me redo the stuff. Cool. I think we are done with the migration to this file too. Great. Now let's work on our app.jsx file. Okay, there's a lot of stuff happening here. So let's rename it and see the amount of errors that's going to cause. Again, looks like TypeScript hasn't fully restarted. Quite a few errors this time. There's an error at our function add task. There's an error at our function delete task. Clear all tasks seems to be fine. And none of our properties presentation is causing any issues. And there's also one error at set task. We'll work on this, but for now let's work on the add task, because we know we already typed it in our add task component, like what add task is about, right? So where is our button add task? So we know that this add task is expecting a string, right? Whereas this add task, the one which we are actually passing in this component, is a any. So we can quickly type this out. We know that it's a string. And similarly on the delete task part, we know that ID, if we hover over our task component and look at our ID, right? It expects nothing, but here we're passing the ID as a number, right? We are able to infer, which is coming from our default state where the ID is a number. So that's how we know that this will also be a number. We quickly see that there's this error with set task, and which is happening because type ID number task name string or type ID string task name string is not assignable to type ID number task name string. So there's a conflict here where ID can be both number and string. And why do you think that is happening? In fact, this is one of those cases where TypeScript really shines. This is telling us about a potential bug over here. If you look at how the new task ID is constructed, it's a string. It's not a number. We're using math.random and we're converting it to string and doing a substring. So whereas in our default state, the ID was a number, and here we are assigning a string as an ID. So there's some data inconsistency over here. Maybe this is fine, but usually it's not. IDs, it's better to either use strings or numbers. So we see that there's a potential bug over here. What could we do? We can quickly solve this by typecasting that string back to a number. And we can see that our type issues are gone. And again, our dev server might break because of the renaming we are doing. Just rerun the dev server. Everything should work as expected. And we also caught a potential bug. There's one more thing which TypeScript isn't complaining about. It's not an issue right now, but it could be an issue in the future. If you look at the task component, the type which we type for the task is task name string. But whereas the task which we are passing also has an ID. This is fine because we are not using ID instead of a task. But there seems to be some kind of inconsistency with that type. Maybe type the task type somewhere and use it everywhere across the application so that there's only one source of truth for our types, right? Let me do that. I'll just quickly create a file. We can call it types.ts, and I'll export my type of task from here. So export type task, and it has an ID, which is a number, and it has a name, which is a string. So I'm going to use this task type everywhere. I'm going to also type my useState, even though TypeScript is able to infer the type of the task from here. It's not a good idea. People could change this. And if it was default, again, too many things would have broken. So let's type it out. In fact, let me just type the task type here. The reason it's not able to infer is because the types export type task and the task component have the same name. So let me just quickly import the type as task type. I'm just using an alias here from my, okay, I'm not sure why. Did I create my file elsewhere? Okay, I think again it's an issue with my dev server or something. Let me restart that and let me restart the TS server. This seems to work. Now let's use our task type over here. and we know that the task type is an array. So this is how we say that our single type, which is a task, is an array. We just use these square brackets to indicate it's an array. Now you can see that the errors are gone, and we can also use this particular import in our task component too, where we were typing it like this. So let's also import our task type here and say that the task type is this, and we are pretty much good with that. Cool, all the errors are gone. Our application still works. In fact, we're not making much changes to our actual JavaScript logic, except for this part where we were working with the ID and fix the potential bug. Cool. There's just one more file left. That's the interesting file, which is the main.jsx file. So again, same process. Let's just update this to TSX. And again, dev server issues. You can just rerun that. And what is happening here? There's only one error. It says that argument of type HTML element or null is not assignable to type of parameter container. Right? Type null is not assignable to type container. So in this case, create React DOM.create root is expecting our HTML DOM element. And when we do document.get element by ID, this could be null, right? If I make a mistake like this, it is a null. There's nothing like root dot root in our index.html, right? There's only ID root. And TypeScript really doesn't have a way to also know about HTML. TypeScript can only work with JavaScript. So in this case, we have to tell TypeScript that trust us that this value is not null. So trust the developer that this value won't be null. The way to tell TypeScript that is to using this bang operator. It's a non-null assertion operator, and it's simply an exclamation mark. So this will tell TypeScript that, yeah, this value will exist, and I can guarantee that. So this is one of those cases where this operator must be used. So be very careful when you're using this. Otherwise, even though you're using TypeScript, things might break for you. And with that, our application should be good to go. Again, I think a dev server issue. Failed to load main.jsx. That's this file. Okay. Yeah, I am back in our index.html. We also have to point to the tsx file and not the jsx file. Vite will handle this stuff. So yeah, that was the issue. So there's a solution attached to, but I'm not sure how well most of you would know how to run this React restart the TS server. That's the reason I'm making this video. So feel free to also read the solution. It is also detailed, but I think the video does more justice to this particular question. All right, see you in the next video.